Hi, still unnamed video blogger here. Today's topic is what I beginning to suspect is how superfluous marriage is. We're told from a young age, not necessarily directly, but by example, television, etc., that's kind of how things are supposed to be, how we are supposed to meet somebody, the one, get married, have kids. The dad generally works harder than he needs to support himself and shares the excess with his kids and wife. And the wife stays home for a few years. Or if she's somewhat lazy, then she stays home basically the rest of her life and doesn't go back to work, or gets some part-time casual work, call it a wife job, with no real stress, but some challenge, just basically some place to go. And on the edges, that seems to be changing a little bit. Not sure for the good or the worst. You kind of watch trends, see where they're going, and make a decision as to how you're going to act. It's a little cold. Some of your positions are going to be losers. For instance, you choose the wrong spouse. And there's all kinds of things. Some say 25% of the population has some sort of mental disorder. So if you're getting married, you have to watch out for those signs. It's going to be mild to severe. One thing I do know is if you choose the wrong spouse, your life can be quite intolerable. Now, back in the day, people died young, of course, but back in the day, there was wars, disease, childbirth deaths, which really didn't start until about 100 years ago, roughly. And so people always had a second chance, or they died too young, it didn't matter. Nowadays, the risks for the woman, the wife, are that their spouse may have difficulty holding a job or have an unsuccessful business. And the risk for the man is basically divorce is easy. And despite the stereotypes, the majority of women are the ones that file for divorce. And hard to say, but if you assume all ethnic groups, the divorce rate approaches 50% in some places. Canada, it's in the 40s, perhaps 40%, or a little higher. And part of that is the no-fault divorce concept, but I would argue it's not choosing your spouse very well. Guys have a tendency to fall in love with the woman they're meeting and ignoring a lot of the faults, and women to a certain degree. But women also have a tendency to look how to trade up, how to be miserable if they decide to stay but thought they could do better. Chris Rock did a comedy routine in the 90s about this. As if you meet a woman and marry her when she's in her 30s, that you're probably not her first choice. There's some women who are quite active sexually in their 20s with the hookup culture. The irony is that there's only a certain percentage of the guys whom they want to sleep with. These are the top physical specimens, or have some other characteristic. Highly successful. Perhaps they have good game, meaning they know how to seduce women the way they want to be seduced. And that's been in literature and movies for a long time. So, as his per historical standards, when the rich got all the women and the poor got all the dregs, if you reached a certain point in the socioeconomic ladder as a male, you had no sex, maybe with a prostitute. And that seems to be what's happening ever since sexual revolution and the breakdown of the nuclear family, which sort of gave a beta male an opportunity to get married to a nice enough woman. In some ways, it's hard to know if that was even ever true in practice, but we would like to think so. Yeah, nostalgia. And of course, the examples of the happy marriage you just see automatically eliminate the ones that didn't make it. The ones that hide themselves because they're so miserable. I remember a time when I did the census in the 80s, and I was somewhat appalled at some of the relationships I saw. Quite frankly, the disgust. Some of the spouses head towards each other. One particular guy whose beta is always doing his best, as he thought the rules stood, to make his wife happy by deferring to her, etc. Quite frankly, it wasn't working. I think he needed to red pill her. In fact, I was quite appalled what his day-to-day life must be, given what I saw. Not sure what the answer is. Popular media tells you that perhaps we're not meant to be married so long. If you take a narrative, which in my view means ignoring certain things and emphasizing other things, let's call it mainstream media, and reporting things as you like them to be or how you want them to be presented. And perhaps that's true. What also seems to be true is a lot of guys in their 20s want to get married quite badly, and then by the time they're 30 to 35, they're having second thoughts. Lost my train of thought. So men approach their 30s, a little older, and suddenly their sexual market value rises and women's is declining. And depending on how people take care of themselves and genetics, seems to even out around 30, 31 for each. And the men suddenly are in demand and a little puzzled, and the women are suddenly deciding that they want to lock down some guy to help provide for them. And like I said, not their first choice. So they're never ultimately very happy. Hence why the group of women get together and complain about their husbands. But then the men at that age, so a woman wants to meet some guy who's her age, a little older, generally, and she wants to marry somebody, generally, who's the same status or higher. And the man, if he's smart, in my opinion, decides, I'm going to aim for the 20, 25-year-olds, 23-year-olds. And you have the conflict. Suddenly what women were doing wasn't so bad, but men are doing a horrible thing. Because these women want to lock down a relationship. They want to, within a year, a proposal, a wedding in another year, kids in another year. Suddenly they're 33, 34, want to have 2 kids. and they're 35, 36. So you have an older person, risk of somewhat of some problems. And you have a guy who didn't have the same opportunities as his wife in the marketplace. Doesn't mean she's left around. And suddenly he feels a little ripped off about life, and she feels tenuous at best that she just made it. I think people have to rethink that. There has to be a better strategy. Personally, in my 20s, I was going out with girls who were, one was a long-term relationship as well. And quite frankly, I was supporting her to a large degree. She was working, but I was covering most of the expenses. She was paying for her school, and we literally had no time. And that's what killed the relationship, although there were other problems as well. In hindsight, I should have met more girls. But I did after we broke up, new city, etc. And quite frankly, it was a lot easier when I was 30. That's it.